In Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Issue 1, debate or derision?
And you look at the questions. Donald Trump, are you a comic book villain? Ben Carson, can you do math? John Kasich, will you insult 2 people over here? Marco Rubio, why don't you resign? Jeb Bush, why have your numbers fallen?
Senator Ted Cruz, one of 14 GOP presidential candidates, satirizing the questions in Wednesday's CNBC 2016 Republican presidential debate held at the University of Colorado in Boulder. But get this. The debate lasted 2 hours, apparently only because of an ultimatum.
And I have to hand it to Ben. We called Ben. He was with me 100%. We called in. We said, that's it. We're not doing it. They lost a lot of money. Everybody said it couldn't be done. Everybody said it was going to be 3 hours, 3.5, including them. And in about 2 minutes, I renegotiated it down to 2 hours so we can get the hell out of here. Not bad. Not bad.
Question, what do Cruz and Trump have in common? Pat Buchanan.
They are both unapologetic individuals. They talk right back to political correctness. They like to fight. They're outspoken. They take strong stands. They have great appeal to what John Judas wrote about in a recent magazine, the so-called middle American radicals, which have a major movement in America over the years. And I think the two of them, John, both of them were winners in that debate, partly or almost entirely because of the tough stands they took.
Well, Trump has been courting Cruz, and Cruz has been courting Trump really from the beginning. They're like 2 people in a bicycle race. Trump is in the lead, and you've got Cruz right there behind him, ready to take over in case the Trump should fade, which everyone expects at some point. Some of his voters will be available to move to another camp. Cruz is the natural recipient. He has a lot of money. He has big donors. He has a structure that he has put in place. He actually has a plan to win the presidency. I think he's been underestimated until this debate. He even showed a flash of humor, which softens that hardline Dracula image that he's perfected on Capitol Hill. So he's the one to watch, especially if Trump does begin to fade, although there's always the possibility Trump doesn't fade, right, Pat?
I agree with pretty much everything Eleanor said. I think he's right in the slipstream
Let's
of
talk
Donald
about
Trump.
some facts related to this, either tangentially or directly. Obama missed 64.3% of votes during his 2008 bid.
You're talking about the shot, the Rubio Jeb Bush shot right now, John.
While Kerry missed 89.8% while running for president in 2004. Graham was absent for 37% of votes during his short-lived campaign.
You're talking about Rubio's shot at Jeb Bush, which was enormously successful and put Jeb right on the canvas.
Yeah.
Although I don't know of anybody whose vote has turned on a attendance record of a candidate in the Senate. I don't care what
exactly. Although Senator Rubio was on the Senate floor recently saying that people who work for the VA, if they don't do their job, they should be fired or they should quit. And so maybe he should take his own advice. It's a little hypocritical.
I think what you see there is a reflection of the fact that Jeb Bush is very, very concerned that Marco Rubio, that donors are moving towards Marco, that the initiative, if you will, is with Marco Rubio, and that Jeb Bush, he did not have a good debate. He was seen as lackluster, and his challenge to Rubio really did not work. And Rubio is playing off that now. The Bush campaign is in crisis mode at the moment, no question.
Yeah, Jeb's soft spots were showing there.
And I think Jeb Bush has got to take down Rubio soon. My guess is you're going to see attack ads from super PACs and things like that, because you're exactly right. Those two are in the same lane, and only one of them is going to make it to the finals.
Yeah, but Bush shouldn't be doing that personally. First of all, it's not in his nature. He looks extremely awkward doing it. The media is going to start going after Rubio. His record in Florida, his sort of absence of doing anything in the Senate aside from not showing up for votes. So
But
Jeb needs to let somebody else
establishment is
do
going
that.
to move. If I had to predict some, the establishment's going to move to Rubio because he's the one closest to them with the best shot of winning it in the long run.
Okay. Ohio Governor John Kasich.
Mr. Bush wasn't the only candidate throwing punches. Enter Ohio Governor John Kasich criticizing Ben Carson and Donald Trump.
We're just going to have a 10% tithe, and that's how we're going to fund the government? And we're going to just fix everything with waste, fraud, and abuse? Or that we're just going to be great? Or we're going to ship 10 million Americans or 10 million people out of this country, leaving their children here in this country and dividing families? Folks, we got to wake up.
Governor Kasich tried to position himself in this debate as a voice of reason and experience and a reformer. Will it be enough to keep him in the running? I ask you, Tom.
I don't think so. Look, I think John Kasich does bring a lot to the party in terms of challenging, making points that are difficult for some people to accept, but I suspect that he's saturated out, right? He's trying to move into an area that Rubio and Bush to some degree have occupied, and I don't think he's going to be able to puncture his way in.
Yeah, he's a high-performing governor of Ohio. No Republican has won the presidency without Ohio. He's got a path to the number 1 or number 2 spot on the ticket. I thought.
He's got to elude the idea of running for vice president.
Right.
That's how everybody thinks of him right now.
Yeah.
Which is too bad. I was watching Kasich, and he reminded me of Jimmy Stewart and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. You know, ladies and gentlemen, one of these people is going to ruin this country if they get elected. Listen to me. I'm trying to.
Who played the role?
Kasich was playing the role.
I know. Who was
Jimmy
Stewart?
Jimmy Stewart.
Did you finish the point you were making?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kasich basically kicked the door open for criticizing of the field, and then he kind of backed away, and other candidates walked through it. I thought Rubio and Cruz
Trump backhanded
did better.
him, but his problem is, let me tell you what Kasich's problem is.
Okay.
Very smart, capable. He'd be an excellent budget director, excellent cabinet officer. The persona is too angry. It is too hot in a McLuhanist sense for television. It is not cool. And I think that's one of his problems. He came off as too angry with these folks. Why can't he point it out with a sense of humor?
Yeah. Well, he tried to be cool in earlier debates, and nobody paid attention to him. So he's kind of a little bit of desperation was showing.
If my memory is correct, and of course it is.
Of
course it is. I recall that on 2 of the post-debate collections of journalists having a drink and talking to each other in gatherings after the debate, large gatherings. The number that came up as number 1 was John Kasich.
Yeah.
As having, you remember that?
He is popular because he is a moderate, so people like him would want him to represent more of the Republican Party brand in that journalist field. But the problem is, I don't see how he gets beyond Rubio.
Yeah, but there's another debate in another week. There are several more debates. There's still time here. It's too early to pronounce any of these candidates dead and gone.
He mentioned Rubio, and therefore we can go to Medicare and Social Security with Rubio.
And here's Marco Rubio on entitlement reform.
We're all talking about reforms for future generations. Nothing has to change for current beneficiaries. My mother's on Medicare and Social Security. I'm against anything that's bad for my mother.
Any thoughts about that, Pat?
Yeah, I think I can tell you what Marco Rubio's doing, as opposed to Chris Christie, who was very, if you will, responsible. He said we're going to have to cut entitlement growth, do this, cost of living increases. What Marco Rubio was saying is, all you folks getting Social Security and Medicare, I am no threat to you. Right. They will maintain it what it is, and they will look at reforms down the road, which politically is the right position to be in. Yeah. Whether it's the most responsible, Clarence, I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, but he is working against that image that he's this kid who might threaten my Social Security. He's assuring everybody, hey, I've got a mom. I wouldn't hurt her. I wouldn't hurt you.
He's saying Tom's going to get hurt, but Clarence Sandler and Pat are going to be okay. And politically, that's the thing. That's the only way you can do it.
Even Christie is not going to go after current recipients or anything like that. And this was supposed to be an economic debate. I really didn't hear much about anybody's plans. They all trotted out these fantasies about a flat tax, which has been around for a long time.
Where was the Trans-Pacific Partnership, trade deficits, QE3, the Federal Reserve, except for auditing the Federal Reserve, nothing.
They talked about the tax code, and I have it here.
The panel was deficient.
Trump and Marco Rubio and Bush and Chris Christie and they have previously proposed cutting current tax rates to 8% to 35%, depending on the bracket, with various reforms to marriage and child credits and capital gains, corporate and estate taxes. Candidates like Ted Cruz, Ben Carson, and Rand Paul said they support replacing the current tax system with a simpler form of a flat tax.
Yeah, they are, but nothing like that is
That's
ever
not
going to
gonna
get through. But they all got their tax plans, John. But there are, I mean, the major issue coming up is the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal.
That should have
Hillary's
been featured,
against
yeah.
it, Bernie's against it, Trump's against it. You had a real conflict there and a great issue. They didn't even bring it up.
But even their tax plans, they all highly reward top earners when the big challenge facing the country is this income disparity. I don't think anybody out there is screaming that they want more trickle-down economics. Nobody had any plan. I don't think they even said the word middle class very often.
Even more important, their plans don't work. I mean, for half of them, you know, Ben Carson stood up there, was told your flat tax or your tithing tax is not going to pay the bills. He said, "Oh yes, they will. Those experts are wrong."
And I think
where's the details on this?
Yes, that is right. Kasich was right to point that out. But at the same time, look, I mean, with Hillary Clinton's plans, with the expanding state, with more spending, with this idea that the taxes can go at the top, which Europe has proved doesn't work. At some point, you have to tax at those lower levels. If interest rates go up because of that pressure, then who loses out? So let's have a math-based debate, and that's why I think Paul Ryan is good.
You're both talking substance.
Right, thank
you. They
you.
got a flat tax, and they're talking flat tax because politically, that has enormous appeal to the Republican base and the entire Republican Party. Supply-siders and populists, get all those tax rates down. That's why you got 6 flat taxes and a tithe out there.
Mike Huckabee, he called these plans, that is the tax arrangements that I mentioned here, and you've tried to discuss. These plans are, quote, putting lipstick on a pig, unquote, and told CNBC he would promote replacing income tax and the end of the IRS with a higher sales tax. What do you think of that?
I think it's, I honestly, I'm happy you brought up Huckabee because this is the guy who's selling these fake diabetes thing. He's someone I think has very little credibility. And also as much I would prefer that we had a system where, you know, the tax code is massively simplified, massively made more efficient so that it's effective, you can have lower rates, bit more revenue, but at the same time, you cannot just have a sales tax because that would kill poor people in America.
John, let me tell you what you could get. You could put a 20% tariff on all imports and get $600 billion and eliminate the corporate tax. Why didn't somebody ask Donald Trump, look, you seem to be a protectionist, would you put on a tariff? And if he said yes, how high? Ask the others what they think of these things instead, you know, instead of what they did.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like to criticize my colleagues in the
right
world
ahead.
of journalism.
Feel free.
No, I mean, it's tough to come up with questions that you feel you don't want to just give them a forum to present their stump speech. That's what they'd like to do. So you're trying to break through. Sure. But again, this was supposed to be an economic debate. Right. They should have drilled down on economic issues. If they did a round of everybody what they thought of the Federal Reserve, we would have heard some good conspiracy theories. We might have heard some solid information. There were ways to elicit information where you found out something more about these candidates.
But they asked about fantasy football.
Right.
Should it be regulated?
Right.
Well, that's a regulation issue, at least.
There was a clear.
It doesn't matter. They didn't answer the questions we wanted them to answer anyway.
Cruz was. We actually should have had sort of some center left. We should have had Ellen and Clarence there giving some questions because those moderators there were asking. It showed media bias. There was an arrogance, right, that they wanted to make it a cartoon and they didn't care.
The worst moment of the evening, I thought, was when the one woman questioned Trump. And he denied that he had said what he said, and she said, "Where did I read that?" You're asking Trump where you read it, you know. I mean, that was a weak.
And Harwood made
the audience for the CNBC debate was how many million people?
14 million.
14 million. Why was it so far below the first 2 GOP debates?
The
first 2 debates.
Every debate.
How many in the first?
25, 26 million Fox.
25 in the first. What was the second one?
I think it was closer to 22.
Oh, you're off there.
23.
You've got to get with it.
Okay.
23. 25,
You're reading from your card, John.
Okay. But this was the first of the presidential debates that had to compete with a World Series baseball game. And by the way, with regard to the cards,
is on a much smaller network.
With regard to the cards, rank has its privileges. You know that.
Look, John, one of the reasons it's smaller is not, I mean, we all turn in at one time or another, MS to Fox to CNN. We all don't turn into the NBC Business Channel.
Issue 2, a new speaker, a new deal.
About the process, I can say this. I think this process stinks.
The Honorable Paul D. Ryan of the state of Wisconsin, having received a majority of the votes cast, is duly elected as Speaker of the House.
But let's be frank. The House is broken. We're not solving problems. We're adding to them. Only a fully functioning House can truly represent the people. And if there were ever a time for us to step up, this would be that time.
Paul Ryan, new Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, took office on Thursday, pledging to make politics work better. But on Wednesday, before Mr. Ryan took the Speaker's gavel, the House of Representatives passed a major bipartisan budget deal. Here are its 8 key elements. First, government spending. It will increase by a total of $50 billion in 2016 and $30 billion in 2017. The increases will be split equally between defense and domestic programs, but an additional $31 billion will also be allocated for defense spending over 2 years. Second, $168 billion in long-term savings will be made by reforming the Social Security Disability Fund. Third, a 2% cut in Medicare payments to some health care providers will stay. Fourth, companies will no longer have to automatically enroll employees with health insurance. Fifth, $8 billion will be allocated to prevent Medicare premium hikes that some beneficiaries were expecting next year. Sixth, generic drug companies will have to pay higher rebates to state Medicare funds if and when drug prices rise above inflation. 7. To generate revenue, oil will be sold from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. 8. The U.S. debt borrowing limit will be lifted until 2017. The deal is expected to be passed by Senate this weekend and signed into law by President Obama shortly thereafter.
Is this budget deal a good deal or a bad deal, Eleanor?
It's a good deal, and it couldn't have happened if John Boehner hadn't resigned. He basically gave up the speakership because he knew he would have been forced out if he tried to put through this budget. The House Republicans have now come to terms with an interim honeymoon that allows Boehner to leave, cleaning out the barn, as he puts it. This budget will take the administration to the end of Obama's term, give the new president a year without having to worry about the debt ceiling. In a dysfunctional government, it's amazing they got this done. It's a small bore deal in the great scheme of things, but it's positive. Both parties win.
Do you think it's small bore?
Look, it's a reflection of the fact that Republicans are in a position as they would conceive it as weakness in Congress, right? That moving towards the presidential election. There's a positive, I think, to this in my generation, beginning of reforms to entitlements. We have to see that happen. But I do have a concern about this. 2 things. Number one, I think it was an extraordinary neglect of his responsibilities of President Obama to say no defense spending unless I get my domestic increases. But also, if you look at the spending that we have at the moment, the percentage of GDP, it is a problem. CBO curve says that it's going to increase again. That puts interest rates. My generation gets screwed.
John, Ryan said the process stinks. The Republicans got 247, 248 House seats, and he says the House is broken. This was an orderly Republican retreat to a new line of defense, maybe in 2017 or something like that. They caved in. They've broken the spending caps here. And Nancy Pelosi's got a victory. And Republicans, all they got is Republicans didn't want to fight, and so they didn't fight, and they lost.
Well, they couldn't have done it if Boehner wasn't resigning, though. That's the thing. He had to throw his body down on the sword in order to get this through. And it really holds the line. There are some modest reforms around the edges. I mean, they were able to cut back on Medicare spending without breaking out in hives. That's important on Capitol Hill because this is a third rail issue. And before you can have real reform, you've got to be able to deal with that. But the House is so fractious right now, and the Senate to a certain degree, that it's remarkable that they got any kind of a budget through. And in fact, they were able to hold off any more threats of debt ceiling crises over the next 2 years, which nowadays suddenly that's saying something.
It's huge. you know.
Well,
Right.
look, but it is a victory for the Democrats. They have got more of what they wanted.
It's a victory for America. It's a victory for America. We got a budget. We don't have to worry about a government shutdown for 2 years. That's everybody wins.
A very prominent Republican said this about the Ryan plan to me. He says it's a good deal because a political stalemate over the debt ceiling now
Boehner plan
would have rattled economic confidence at a time when third quarter growth has dropped to 1.5% and the markets are nervous. They're jittery.
Of course. And aren't they always?
You agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, one thing markets care about is stability in Washington. You know, as long as we're not on the brink of something, and we've been practicing brinkmanship now for a good 6 years.
The Dow's been going up, but there is a truth in this thing. Look, if Republicans had done the right thing, they wouldn't have shut down the government, but they would have been blamed for it. If there's no debt ceiling, they would have been blamed for the whole thing. Not the Democratic Senate, not Obama, but the Republicans. And so they said, we give up.
Let's say one nice thing about the new speaker. I mean, Paul Ryan is a quality human being and a quality politician. It's a new generation, so maybe there's some hope lies ahead for some breakthroughs, further breakthroughs with the White House.
100% agree with Ellen on that. And just one final thing, the markets, though, also want long-term confidence that we're going to resolve our debt issue.
That's an excellent point. Issue 3, the Ferguson effect.
Something has changed in a lot of places in 2015. Far more people are being killed in some of America's cities than in many years. In today's YouTube world, are officers reluctant to get out of their cars and do the work that controls violent crime? Are officers answering 911 calls, but avoiding the informal contact that keeps bad guys from standing around, especially with guns? I do have a strong sense that some part of the explanation is a chill wind that has blown through law enforcement over the last year. And that wind is surely changing behavior.
For the first time in decades, violent crime is on the rise in the U.S.'s top 50 cities. In Washington, D.C., murders are up 20% so far this year. In recent speeches to the University of Chicago Law School and the International Association of Chiefs of Police, FBI Director James Comey has warned that the spike in homicides is due to something dubbed the, quote, Ferguson effect, unquote. 1 year ago, in August, Michael Brown was killed by police in Ferguson, Missouri, triggering protests, riots, and demands for widespread changes in police methods. President Barack Obama is the leading advocate for changes in law enforcement tactics and prison sentences. The result is that demoralized police officers now avoid potential confrontations. So says Director Comey, the nation's top law enforcement officer. President Obama disagrees. This week, Mr. Obama dismissed rising crime rates as not, quote, statistically meaningful, unquote. But the president's former chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, now mayor of Chicago, a city particularly hard hit by murder rates, sides with Director Comey. Quote, we have allowed our police department to get fetal, and it is having a direct consequence. They have pulled back from the ability to interdict. They don't want to be a news story themselves. They don't want their career ended early, and is having an impact, unquote.
What's Rahm mean by getting fetal?
Well, that's disputed, by the way, by the police union leader who, pointing out that police are not getting fetal in the face of crime.
What's fetal mean?
Well, what he means is fetal position. They're crouching down there. They're like hiding behind their cars and not getting out and patrolling. In fact, there is the Ferguson effect, first of all, ought to be called the cell phone effect, because cell phone cameras have changed everything around this issue. Look at the big cases, and they've been generated by cell phone videos. In Chicago, the city, because of its financial situation, has had to cut back considerably on police and police patrols over the recent years. and that has resulted in less community policing. So the police aren't getting as much of an opportunity to get out and know their community, know the contacts, and that's the really effective way to bring down crime rates. And also one other note on this, even in Chicago and Washington, places that have had rises in their crime rates lately, those rates are still lower than they were 20 years ago.
Yeah,
So
Clarence,
look, we shouldn't overdo
there's more
this.
people. There's many people murdered this year in Baltimore as in New York City, which is 13 times as large.
Right.
What Comey said is basically, anecdotally, has to be true. These cops are watching TV. They're watching cops who, some of whom do excessive violence and stuff like that. Others who get into trouble. Others who think they don't. A cop, as an individual, they have to be affected by this, and there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
I think Comey understands these police,
Yeah.
and you got the politicians aren't the ones
Right.
you look to,
Right.
and Comey's exactly right.
Well, anecdotally, you're right, but anecdotes can kill you. You know, the fact is, statistically, it's very much disputed that there's a Ferguson effect.
Yeah, there's no statistical evidence that this is
yet.
true,
Right,
and
exactly.
the anecdotes have been fueling it, and particularly, I mean, it's kind of on the right in particular, because they really want to stop the focus on the police behavior. And the administration, I don't think, is going to back off of that. Justice Barnes is going to back off of that. But the president was careful this last week. He spoke to an international group of sheriffs to basically express confidence and admiration in the people who do law enforcement work.
Do you think President Obama's in denial? Do you think he's in denial?
No.
He's not
John,
in
let me get in
denial
here,
at
'cause
all,
we're coming to the
no.
end. Look, I think the important point here is clearly it's Comey you listen to rather than the politicians. It's like if you have cancer, you listen to the oncologist, not the business manager of the hospital, because he's the expert. Comey is a widely bipartisan respected. Police officers have an exceptionally difficult job. Body cameras help gathering evidence. They help stop abuse. But at the same time, there are communities that are trying to jump on this bandwagon and say peaceful protest is the same as throwing rocks at police officers, and that has an effect, and it's serious, and we should condemn it.
Well, Comey's been hearing anecdotes from police officers, and I respect that, but the numbers aren't there.
Prediction, Pat.
Angela Merkel is on the way out.
Hello.
Mitt Romney's campaign idea of capping deductions for higher earners will make a comeback.
Tom.
Now that U.S. Special Forces in Syria, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, leader of ISIS, will be dead by the end of the year, which is great news.
Republicans are meeting with the networks, and they're going to have a debate next time. It'll be much more to their liking.
Buenos Aires Mayor Mauricio Macri, the son of Italian immigrants, will win the November 22nd presidential runoff election. His center-right coalition, Cambiemos, will bring Peronist rule in Argentina to an end after its 12-year happy stretch. Happy Halloween. Bye-bye.